Dear child, there is something your heart has been waiting to understand, even if your mind has tried to forget it. Last night, while the world was asleep, one emotional conversation changed more than anyone expected. Every word spoken carried your name, even when your name was never said out loud. Don't skip, because the truth behind that conversation will slowly unfold, and every moment matters. Listen carefully. Last night was not an ordinary night. It was one of those rare moments when silence became heavier than words, when emotions refused to stay hidden, and when someone who had spent far too long pretending to be strong finally allowed their heart to speak. Your soulmate had been carrying feelings they could no longer bury beneath responsibilities, expectations, and fear. They sat quietly with someone they trusted deeply, someone who had watched their struggle for years without ever knowing the entire truth. At first, the conversation sounded ordinary. They talked about family, about the future, about decisions that everyone else believed had already been made. But beneath every sentence was a different story, a story that had always been connected to you. Every pause revealed another hidden emotion. Every deep breath carried another memory. Every time they tried to change the subject, their heart pulled them back toward the one person they had never truly left behind. That person was you. They admitted that despite everything life had placed between the two of you, there had never been a single day when they completely stopped wondering where you were, how you were, or whether fate would ever allow your paths to cross again. The listener remained silent because they realized these were not casual memories. These were emotions that had survived disappointment, distance, misunderstandings, and time itself. Your soulmate confessed that they had smiled in front of others while quietly breaking inside, hoping no one would notice the weight they carried. They admitted that every major decision over the past months had been influenced by thoughts they could never explain. Even when people believed they had moved on, their heart continued returning to the same unanswered questions. Why did everything remind them of you? Why did every happy moment somehow feel incomplete? Why did every celebration carry an invisible emptiness? Those questions echoed through the room until silence itself seemed to answer them. The conversation grew even deeper as forgotten memories returned with remarkable clarity. Your soulmate remembered the smallest details, the sound of a familiar laugh, the kindness shown during an ordinary day, the comfort they once felt simply knowing you existed somewhere in the world. They confessed something they had never dared admit before. They had spent countless nights imagining different endings to the story they believed had already finished. Sometimes they imagined receiving one unexpected message. Sometimes they imagined meeting you in the most ordinary place and discovering that neither of you had truly forgotten the other. Sometimes they imagined saying all the words fear had stolen from them years ago. They admitted that they often wondered whether destiny had delayed something rather than destroyed it. The person listening finally asked a question that changed the atmosphere completely. If you had one chance to tell them the truth without fear, what would you say? For a long moment there was no reply. The silence stretched across the room until even the ticking clock seemed louder than before. Then your soulmate slowly lifted their eyes, and tears that had been held back for far too long finally appeared. They whispered that they would apologize for every moment when fear spoke louder than love. They would admit they had allowed outside voices to influence decisions that should have belonged only to the heart. They would confess that no matter how many new faces entered their life, no one ever replaced the place you quietly occupied. Don't skip. Because this was only the beginning. Neither of them realized that someone standing just outside the half-open door had accidentally heard enough of the conversation to understand one shocking truth. That unexpected witness was about to make a decision before sunrise, one that would set events in motion neither your soulmate nor anyone else could stop. Before the first light of morning touched the sky, the person who had quietly overheard the conversation found themselves unable to sleep. Every sentence they had heard echoed louder with each passing minute. They had never intended to discover such a deeply guarded truth, yet now they carried a secret that could change the lives of several people at once. They replayed every word in their mind, especially the moment your soulmate admitted that no amount of time had erased the place you still held in their heart. That confession felt too genuine to ignore. It was not spoken to impress anyone. It was spoken during a moment of complete emotional surrender, when pretending had finally become impossible. The hidden listener understood that some truths reveal themselves only once, and if ignored, they may never return again. As dawn approached, they made a quiet promise to themselves that they would no longer remain a silent witness. Whatever had separated two hearts for so long deserved to be questioned before another irreversible decision was made. Don't skip. Because one unexpected action was already beginning to rewrite a future everyone believed had already been decided. Meanwhile, your soulmate woke after barely sleeping at all. The emotional weight of the previous night had followed them into the morning. Although they had finally spoken their heart aloud, they also feared the consequences of being so vulnerable. They wondered whether they had revealed too much, whether those deeply buried emotions should have remained hidden forever. They had no idea someone else now carried the truth with them. Throughout the morning, family members continued discussing upcoming marriage plans as if nothing had changed. Smiles appeared around the table, conversations sounded normal, and decisions were being pushed forward with increasing confidence. Yet your soulmate remained strangely quiet. Every question directed toward them was answered with hesitation. Every attempt to sound certain ended in another thoughtful silence. One relative finally noticed the difference and asked whether something had happened the night before. Your soulmate forced a faint smile and simply replied that they had been thinking about life. No one pressed further, but the hidden listener recognized that answer immediately. They knew exactly what those thoughts were about. They also knew that if the truth remained buried any longer, another heart could be broken forever. Quietly, without informing anyone, they reached into a drawer and removed an old envelope they had kept for years. Inside was something almost forgotten, a small piece of evidence connected to you that no one else in the family even remembered existed. Their hands trembled as they stared at it, realizing this single forgotten item could answer questions that had haunted everyone for far too long. As they carefully placed it into their bag and walked toward the front door, they whispered to themselves that by the end of the day, someone would finally have to face the truth. What they didn't realize was that another family member had just seen them leave and decided to follow them in secret. The family member who had secretly followed the hidden listener stayed several steps behind, careful not to make a sound. Curiosity slowly turned into fear. They could tell this was not an ordinary morning. Every movement seemed planned, every glance carried a purpose, and every passing minute made the mystery even deeper. After nearly 20 minutes, the hidden listener finally stopped in front of an old house that had remained locked for years. They searched through their pocket, removed a small rusted key, and quietly unlocked the front door. The follower froze. No one in the family had entered this place for a very long time. Why today? Why in complete secrecy? Don't skip. Because the answer waiting inside that forgotten house had the power to change everything they believed about you. Dust covered the furniture, faded photographs rested against the walls, and silence filled every corner of the room. The hidden listener walked directly toward an old wooden cabinet as if they already knew exactly what they were looking for. After opening the lowest drawer, they carefully removed a worn leather journal wrapped inside a white cloth. Their hands shook the moment they opened the first page. Between the yellowed pages rested an old photograph that had never been shown to the rest of the family. It captured a moment everyone had forgotten, yet one face in that picture immediately stood out. It was you. Not standing in the center, not posing proudly, but quietly smiling in the background as if destiny had hidden the most important truth where nobody thought to look. Beneath the photograph was a handwritten note that simply read, "One day, when the truth is finally needed, this picture will explain what words never could." The hidden listener closed their eyes for a moment, realizing that someone had prepared this evidence years before anyone understood why it would matter. At that very moment, your soulmate was sitting through another family marriage discussion. Different relatives continued suggesting dates, introducing names, and talking about future celebrations. Everyone around the table seemed excited except the one person whose future was actually being discussed. Your soulmate barely spoke. Every time someone mentioned marriage, their thoughts drifted back to the emotional conversation from the previous night. The regret they had confessed had not disappeared. Instead, it had grown heavier with daylight. One elder finally looked directly at them and asked, "Is your heart truly ready for this?" The room became completely silent. No one expected such a direct question. Your soulmate looked down at the table, took a slow breath, and after several painful seconds quietly answered, "My heart has been trying to tell me something for a very long time. But I was too afraid to listen." Those words shocked everyone. Some family members exchanged worried looks, while others immediately tried to change the subject before the conversation became uncomfortable. But the hidden listener was already on the way back, carrying the journal, the photograph, and one sealed envelope they had discovered beneath the final page. Across the front of that envelope, written in fading ink, were only 6 unforgettable words. Open this only after the confession. Nobody in the family knew who had written it. Nobody knew when it had been hidden. And nobody realized that before sunset, that mysterious envelope would be placed directly into your soulmate's hands, forcing them to face a truth that could no longer remain buried. The hidden listener slowly lifted the sealed envelope from the table, but before it could reach your soulmate's hands, the sudden voice from across the room stopped everyone in place. No one had expected such a desperate interruption. The family member who had shouted was trembling, their face pale with fear instead of anger. Their eyes never left the envelope, as though they already knew what it contained. The silence that followed became impossible to ignore. Even those who had been speaking confidently about marriage only moments earlier now avoided looking at one another. Your soulmate stood motionless, unable to understand why a single unopened letter could frighten so many people at once. Don't skip. Because the next decision would uncover a truth that had been hidden for years. Without raising their voice, the hidden listener asked one simple question. If there is nothing to hide, why are you trying so hard to stop this? No one answered immediately. The room remained frozen until the frightened relative finally whispered that some secrets were buried to protect the family. But another elder quietly shook their head and replied, "No, some secrets were buried to protect one person's choice." Those words struck the room like thunder. Your soulmate looked from one face to another, realizing that several people already knew pieces of the story but had never spoken about them. For the first time, they understood that the emotional conversation from the previous night was only one part of a much larger truth. Your soulmate slowly picked up the envelope again. Their hands were shaking, but this time they refused to put it back down. They carefully broke the old seal and unfolded the single handwritten page inside. Before reading it aloud, they noticed something unusual. At the bottom of the page was a signature they recognized immediately, a name they had not seen in many years. Their heartbeat quickened. The handwriting belonged to someone who had once promised never to let the truth disappear, no matter how long it took. Taking a deep breath, your soulmate began reading the first few lines in complete silence. With every sentence, the expression on their face changed from confusion to disbelief. By the time they reached the middle of the letter, tears had already begun falling onto the page. No one dared interrupt. The family watched helplessly as your soulmate folded the letter against their chest and closed their eyes. After a long silence, they finally spoke in a voice almost too quiet to hear. Everything I believed about the past was incomplete. Then they slowly turned toward the relatives gathered around the room and asked, "Who decided that I should never know this?" Before anyone could answer, one elderly family member stood up from the corner of the room, took a slow step forward, and whispered, "I did. But I was never acting alone." Those final words left everyone speechless, because they revealed that the person responsible for separating the truth had never been just one individual. There was someone else still hiding in the shadows. And that person had just arrived outside the house. A heavy silence settled over the room after those shocking words. No one moved. No one even seemed willing to breathe. Every eye remained fixed on the elderly family member who had admitted hiding part of the truth. Your soulmate could not believe what they had just heard. The confession was real, yet it felt impossible to accept. For years they had blamed themselves for missed chances, unanswered questions, and painful distance. Now they were learning that the story had never belonged to them alone. There had always been invisible hands quietly guiding every decision from behind the scenes. Don't skip. Because the next visitor was carrying the final missing piece that no one inside the house expected. Just then, 3 slow knocks echoed through the front door. The sound was calm, but it immediately filled the room with tension. Nobody spoke. The hidden listener walked toward the entrance and carefully opened the door. Standing outside was an elderly stranger holding a small wooden box wrapped in faded blue cloth. Their face showed both exhaustion and determination, as though they had traveled a very long way to reach this house. Without asking permission to enter, the stranger looked directly at your soulmate and quietly said, "I was told this box should only be delivered when your heart finally spoke the truth." Those words sent another wave of silence through the family. The hidden listener stepped aside, allowing the stranger to enter. They gently placed the box on the table beside the journal and the letter, then explained that they had protected it for many years because of a promise they could never break. Inside the room, several older relatives immediately recognized the box. One of them lowered their head, while another slowly sat down, unable to hide their emotions any longer. Your soulmate carefully untied the faded cloth and lifted the wooden lid. Inside rested several neatly folded papers, an old silver key, and a small voice recorder that looked untouched by time. Attached to the recorder was another handwritten note. It read, "Do not listen to this until everyone who knows the truth is present." Before anyone could react, the stranger quietly looked around the room and said, "Someone is still missing." Confused whispers spread through the family. Everyone began counting who was present, yet no one could immediately identify the missing person. Then the stranger slowly pointed toward an empty chair near the window and whispered, "The one who started all of this has not arrived yet. But they know this meeting is happening." Those words unsettled everyone. Almost at the same moment, the sound of a vehicle stopping outside broke the silence once again. Curtains moved as someone looked through the window. A familiar figure stepped out, hesitated for several seconds, and slowly walked toward the front door. The moment your soulmate caught a glimpse of that face, every memory they had buried deep inside rushed back at once. Their breathing became unsteady, their hands tightened around the old recorder, and they whispered only one sentence. "If they are really here today, then nothing will ever be the same again." The front door opened very slowly. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The person standing outside did not rush into the room. They simply stood there, looking at every face before their eyes finally stopped on your soulmate. The expression on their face carried years of regret. Your soulmate remained completely still. Their heartbeat grew faster with every passing second. It felt as though time itself had frozen inside the house. Don't skip. Because the next few minutes would reveal why so many people had worked so hard to keep this meeting from ever happening. The stranger who had delivered the wooden box quietly stepped back. "It is time," they whispered. "No more secrets." The newly arrived visitor slowly walked toward the center of the room. Without saying a single word, they placed another sealed envelope beside the old journal. Unlike the first letter, this envelope looked newer. Someone had protected it carefully for many years. Across the front, only one sentence had been written: "For the day the truth can no longer be hidden." Your soulmate stared at those words. Their hands trembled again. They looked around the room, hoping someone would explain what was happening. Nobody did. Instead, several relatives lowered their eyes toward the floor. One elderly woman quietly wiped tears from her face. Another family member slowly walked toward the window, unable to watch what was about to happen. The silence became heavier than any conversation. Finally, the visitor spoke. "I have carried this burden for far too long. I should have come years ago. But I was afraid. I believed keeping quiet would protect everyone. I was wrong." Every person inside the room listened carefully. No one interrupted. The visitor continued speaking. "The night everything changed. Your soulmate never received the complete truth. Someone made sure that only half the story reached them. That single decision changed every year that followed." Your soulmate closed their eyes. The emotional conversation from the previous night suddenly made even more sense. Every unanswered question, every painful memory, every moment of regret. They were all connected to one hidden choice made long ago. The visitor slowly pointed toward the second envelope. "The answer is inside. But before it is opened, there is something every person in this room deserves to hear." The room fell silent once again. I was there. I watched everything happen. And I stayed silent. That silence became the greatest mistake of my life. A deep breath filled the room. Your soulmate could hardly believe what they were hearing. Then the visitor reached into their coat pocket. Everyone expected another letter. Instead, they removed an old mobile phone. Its screen was cracked. Its battery had long since stopped working. But it still held something priceless. "I never deleted it," the visitor whispered. "It is the last voice message connected to that night." The hidden listener looked completely shocked. The elderly relatives exchanged frightened glances. One person quietly whispered, "No. That recording still exists." The visitor nodded. Every single word. I protected it because one day, someone would finally deserve to hear the complete truth. Your soulmate slowly reached forward. Their fingers stopped only inches away from the phone. No one in the room dared breathe, because everyone understood. The moment that recording began to play, there would be no returning to the life they had known before. The room remained completely silent. No one asked another question. No one reached for the phone. It rested quietly on the table, yet everyone looked at it as though it carried the weight of many forgotten years. Your soulmate slowly pulled their hand back. They closed their eyes for a moment. Taking a deep breath, they whispered, "If this recording changes everything, then everyone deserves to hear it together. Don't skip." Because the truth hidden inside those few minutes of audio had survived longer than anyone ever imagined. The visitor carefully connected the old phone to a small power bank they had brought with them. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. The screen remained black. One family member quietly sighed, believing time had finally erased whatever was inside. Then, a faint light appeared. The phone vibrated once. Everyone in the room stared at the screen. The hidden listener slowly stepped closer. Your soulmate could hear their own heartbeat. The visitor unlocked the phone without saying a word. There was only one saved recording. Only one. The file had never been renamed. It simply showed an old date from years ago. The visitor pressed play. At first, there was only silence. A few seconds later, the sound of rain could be heard in the background. Then footsteps. Someone breathing heavily. And finally, a familiar voice. The moment your soulmate heard that voice, their entire body froze. They recognized it immediately. It belonged to someone they had trusted more than almost anyone else. The room filled with disbelief. No one expected that voice. The recording continued. "I know what I'm about to do will change everything," the voice said quietly. "But if they stay together, my own plans will fall apart. They must never discover the complete truth." Several relatives gasped. One elderly woman covered her mouth with both hands. Another family member slowly sat down, unable to remain standing. The recording continued. "I've already hidden the letters. I've convinced everyone to believe a different story. By the time the truth is discovered, it will be too late." Your soulmate felt tears running down their face. Every painful year, every unanswered question, every moment they believed they had been forgotten, suddenly had a completely different meaning. The visitor paused the recording. No one spoke. The silence became almost unbearable. Then, the hidden listener quietly asked, "Who else knew?" The visitor lowered their head. After a long pause, they answered, "Only one other person helped protect the lie." Before anyone could ask for that name, a loud knock echoed through the house once again. 3 slow knocks. Exactly the same as before. Everyone turned toward the front door. The visitor looked terrified. They whispered only one sentence. "They're here." And they were never supposed to find this recording. The room remained completely silent. No one asked another question. No one reached for the phone. It rested quietly on the table, yet everyone looked at it as though it carried the weight of many forgotten years. Your soulmate slowly pulled their hand back. They closed their eyes for a moment. Taking a deep breath, they whispered, "If this recording changes everything, then everyone deserves to hear it together. Don't skip." Because the truth hidden inside those few minutes of audio had survived longer than anyone ever imagined. The visitor carefully connected the old phone to a small power bank they had brought with them. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. The screen remained black. One family member quietly sighed, believing time had finally erased whatever was inside. Then, a faint light appeared. The phone vibrated once. Everyone in the room stared at the screen. The hidden listener slowly stepped closer. Your soulmate could hear their own heartbeat. The visitor unlocked the phone without saying a word. There was only one saved recording. Only one. The file had never been renamed. It simply showed an old date from years ago. The visitor pressed play. At first, there was only silence. A few seconds later, the sound of rain could be heard in the background. Then footsteps. Someone breathing heavily. And finally, a familiar voice. The moment your soulmate heard that voice, their entire body froze. They recognized it immediately. It belonged to someone they had trusted more than almost anyone else. The room filled with disbelief. No one expected that voice. The recording continued. "I know what I'm about to do will change everything," the voice said quietly. "But if they stay together, my own plans will fall apart. They must never discover the complete truth." Several relatives gasped. One elderly woman covered her mouth with both hands. Another family member slowly sat down, unable to remain standing. The recording continued. "I've already hidden the letters. I've convinced everyone to believe a different story. By the time the truth is discovered, it will be too late." Your soulmate felt tears running down their face. Every painful year, Every unanswered question. Every moment they believed they had been forgotten suddenly had a completely different meaning. The visitor paused the recording. No one spoke. The silence became almost unbearable. Then, the hidden listener quietly asked, "Who else knew?" The visitor lowered their head. After a long pause, they answered, "Only one other person helped protect the lie." Before anyone could ask for that name, a loud knock echoed through the house once again. 3 slow knocks. Exactly the same as before. Everyone turned toward the front door. The visitor looked terrified. They whispered only one sentence. "They're here." And they were never supposed to find this recording. The 3 slow knocks echoed through the house once again. No one moved. No one even looked at each other. The sound seemed far louder than it should have been, as though every secret hidden inside those walls had suddenly come alive. Your soulmate remained standing beside the table, one hand resting on the old phone that had just revealed a truth no one expected to hear. The visitor's face turned completely pale. For the first time since entering the house, they looked genuinely afraid. They whispered softly, "They found us. I prayed this day would never come." The hidden listener slowly walked toward the entrance. Every step felt heavier than the last. Before opening the door, they looked back at everyone gathered inside. Some relatives were crying quietly. Others sat frozen, unable to understand how so many years of silence had collapsed within a single afternoon. The room no longer felt like the place where a marriage discussion had been taking place. It had become a courtroom where the past itself was demanding to be heard. Don't skip. Because the person waiting outside had not come to apologize. They had come to stop the truth from spreading any further. The door opened. Standing outside was a well-dressed figure carrying a dark leather folder. Their expression remained calm. Too calm. They smiled politely before stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. For several long seconds, they said nothing. Instead, their eyes carefully scanned the room. The old journal. The faded photograph. The opened letter. The wooden box. And finally, the old phone. The smile on their face disappeared. "So," they said quietly, "you finally found it." Your soulmate looked directly into their eyes. Neither of them blinked. The tension between them filled the entire room. The newcomer slowly placed the leather folder on the table. "I expected this day eventually. But I hoped the recording would never survive." The visitor immediately stepped forward. "You knew about it?" The newcomer nodded. "Yes. I knew. And I tried to destroy it." A wave of shock spread across the room. One elderly relative could no longer remain silent. They stood up and asked, "Why? Why would you spend so many years protecting a lie?" The newcomer closed their eyes for a brief moment. When they opened them again, they no longer looked confident. Instead, they looked tired. "I thought I was protecting this family. I convinced myself that one painful decision would save everyone. But every year after that, I realized I had only created more suffering." Your soulmate listened carefully. Every word sounded sincere. Yet something still felt incomplete. There was still one missing piece. One question that nobody had answered. "If you truly regret everything," your soulmate asked quietly, "then tell us the one thing nobody here knows." The room became silent once again. The newcomer slowly reached into the leather folder. Everyone expected another letter. Instead, they removed an old hospital document. Its edges had faded with time. Several signatures covered the final page. The hidden listener leaned closer. One signature immediately caught their attention. It matched the handwriting from the mysterious envelope. Their heart began racing. "This document," the newcomer whispered, "was never supposed to exist. It explains why every message disappeared. It explains why every meeting failed. It explains why both of you believed the other had walked away." Your soulmate stared at the document without touching it. For years they had searched for answers. Now those answers seemed to be resting only inches away. But before anyone could unfold the paper, a notification sound suddenly echoed from the old phone. Everyone looked toward the screen. No one had touched it. The phone had powered on only to play the recording. It should not have received anything. Yet a new message had appeared. The sender's name was hidden. There was no number. Only 3 chilling words appeared on the screen. "Too late now." The room fell into complete silence. No one understood how a phone forgotten for years had suddenly received a new message. The visitor slowly stepped backward. The newcomer looked genuinely frightened. Even the hidden listener could not explain what they were seeing. Your soulmate picked up the phone with trembling hands. Another notification appeared immediately beneath the first. This one contained only a single sentence. Turn to the last page of the journal before opening the document. Every face turned toward the old leather journal lying on the table. No one remembered checking its final page. No one even realized there might still be something hidden inside. Your soulmate slowly opened the journal again. They carefully turned page after page until only one remained. The final page looked completely blank. For a brief moment everyone believed the mysterious message had been meaningless. Then the visitor quietly whispered, Hold it against the window. The hidden listener lifted the journal toward the afternoon sunlight. Slowly, very slowly, faint handwritten words began appearing between the fibers of the paper. Invisible ink. A message hidden for years. As the first sentence became readable, every person in the room stopped breathing. Because the message did not begin with an explanation. It began with a warning. If you are reading this today, the person responsible is still closer than you think. The hidden words remained visible beneath the sunlight. No one spoke. Every pair of eyes stayed fixed on the final page of the journal. Your soulmate slowly continued reading. Each sentence felt heavier than the one before it. The person responsible is still closer than you think. Do not search for one villain. Fear, silence, pride, and selfish choices together created this distance. If you truly wish to heal what was broken, stop chasing revenge and start speaking the truth. The room fell into complete silence. Those words changed everything. For years, everyone had searched for a single person to blame. But the journal revealed a far more painful reality. Small lies, unspoken fears, delayed decisions, broken promises. Together, they had built the wall that separated two hearts. The elderly family member who had confessed earlier slowly stood up. Tears filled their eyes. I asked everyone to stay silent. I believed time would erase the pain. I never imagined time would only make it deeper. Another relative quietly stepped forward. I destroyed one letter. I thought I was protecting the family. I now understand I was protecting my own fear. One by one, others began admitting the choices they had hidden for years. Some had ignored the truth. Some had believed rumors without asking questions. Some had stayed silent because speaking up felt too difficult. Your soulmate listened to every confession without interrupting. The anger they had carried for so long slowly disappeared. Not because the past no longer mattered, but because the truth had finally replaced uncertainty. The mysterious visitor then handed your soulmate the old photograph one last time. Keep this, they said softly. It is proof that destiny gave you both a beginning. What happens next depends on the choices you make today. Your soulmate looked at the faded picture for several long moments. A gentle smile, mixed with tears, finally appeared. For the first time in years, their heart felt lighter. Not because every wound had healed, but because every question finally had an answer. They carefully folded the journal closed. The old phone was switched off forever. The sealed envelopes had all been opened. No more hidden recordings remained. No more forgotten letters waited to be discovered. Only the truth remained. As evening sunlight entered through the windows, the atmosphere inside the house completely changed. The marriage discussion that had once been filled with pressure and expectation quietly came to an end. No one mentioned wedding dates. No one spoke about forcing another decision. Instead, the family chose something they should have chosen years ago: honesty. The hidden listener smiled quietly. Their promise had finally been fulfilled. The visitor picked up the empty wooden box and slowly walked toward the door. Before leaving, they turned around and spoke one final sentence. Love survives many storms, but only truth can bring it safely home. With those words, they disappeared into the evening. Your soulmate stepped outside. The wind felt different. The sky looked brighter. The weight they had carried for years no longer controlled their future. They whispered your name with gratitude instead of regret. Not because every ending had already been written, but because hope had returned where hopelessness once lived. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not that destiny changes overnight. Sometimes the greatest miracle is that people finally find the courage to tell the truth. And when truth finally arrives, even years of silence lose their power. The story that began with one emotional conversation ended with something far greater. Not revenge, not anger, not victory over another person. It ended with forgiveness, with understanding, with courage, and with the quiet realization that real love is never measured by how long two people were apart. It is measured by whether their hearts still recognize each other when the truth finally comes to light. The journey was never about discovering who spoke the loudest. It was about discovering who never stopped caring, even through silence. And that was the truth your soulmate had been searching for all along.